Okay, good evening. I hereby call to order the City of Ithaca Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for April 6th, 2021. The board operates under the provisions of the Ithaca City Charter, Ithaca Zoning Ordinance, Ithaca Sign Ordinance, and the board's own rules of procedure. The board comprises 5 members nominated by the mayor and approved by Common Council. Board members present tonight are Stephen Henderson, David Barkin, as well as Megan Wilson, Senior Planner and Secretary to the board. I am Suzanne Charles, Chairperson of the board. The Secretary of the Board, Megan Wilson, will call each case in the order it is listed in the agenda. Appellants will then have a maximum of 5 minutes to present new material or highlight aspects of their appeal. Board members may question appellants on any areas requiring clarification. Full consideration of appeals requiring a public hearing, deliberation, and then voting. Full consideration of appeals requires a public hearing, deliberation, and then voting by the board. These actions occur only after the appellant has filed appropriate documents with the Zoning Division and Planning and Development Board. Public hearings include testimony from interested parties. The board considers interested parties persons who live or work or own property within 750 feet of the property, or who are authorized representatives of recognized adjacent neighborhood civic groups, or who are elected city officials. Board members may question testifying interested parties on any areas requiring clarification. Persons who do not meet the board's interested party definition will not be heard, except that an interested party might designate an agent to speak in place of the interested party and on the interested party's behalf. Interested parties supporting an appeal will testify first, followed by interested parties in opposition. Comments from each interested party are limited to 3 minutes. Appellants will then be allowed to rebut the testimony of opposing interested parties or request adjournment to obtain evidence necessary for rebuttal. Appellants' comments must be limited to strict rebuttal of the issues raised by those opposed and will be limited to 5 minutes. A timer will sound at the end of each person's allotted time. While we do not adhere to strict rules of evidence, we do consider this a quasi-judicial proceeding, and we base our decisions on the official record. The official record consists of application materials filed with the Zoning Division, correspondence relating to cases received by the Zoning Division, and Planning and Development Board's own findings and recommendations, if any, and the record of tonight's meeting. An audio recording is being made of this meeting. Therefore, it is essential anyone wanting to be heard speaks clearly so their comments are recorded and heard by everyone. Extraneous comments will neither be recorded nor considered by the board. We ask everyone to limit their comments to the zoning issues of each appeal and not comment on matters beyond the board's jurisdiction. Following the appellant's rebuttal, the appeal hearing will be closed and the board will begin deliberation. The board is required to render a decision within 62 days of the public hearing's closure. Once the hearing is closed, no further testimony will be taken. It takes 3 votes to approve a motion to grant a variance or favorable interpretation. In the event of a tie vote, an appeal is denied. Tonight's online meeting format requires us to manage public comment differently, but the board still welcomes input from interested parties. Tonight's appeals are available for public review on the city website, and the meeting is being streamed live online via YouTube. Interested parties are welcome to address the board as part of this online meeting or may submit written comments to be read into the public record during the public hearing. Megan, will you kindly call our first case?
Okay, one moment. Let me admit our applicants. All right, appeal number 3178, 222 South Geneva Street. Appeal of Joshua Cope of Greenscope Properties, LLC for an area variance from section 325.8, column 4, off-street parking, column 6, lot area, column 7, lot width, column 10, lot coverage by buildings, column 11, front yard, column 12, side yard, column 13, other side yard, and column 14, 15, rear yard requirements of the zoning ordinance. The applicant seeks a variance to increase the number of bedrooms within the multiple dwelling located at 222 South Geneva Street as part of a larger renovation. As part of the project, the applicant is constructing additional bathrooms and other improvements to support individual renters rather than a large single group. The proposed project will add 2 bedrooms to the existing 9-bedroom house for a total of 11 bedrooms. The addition of these 2 bedrooms will exacerbate existing deficiency in off-street parking. An 11-bedroom multiple dwelling is required to have 8 off-street parking spaces on site. 6 are currently required, and the property provides only 2 spaces. The property also has existing deficiencies in lot area, lot width, lot coverage by buildings, front yard, other side yard, and rear yard that will not be exacerbated by the proposal. The Board of Zoning Appeals began consideration of this appeal and conducted the public hearing on March 2nd, 2021. The board tabled the appeal to gather more information on allowed occupancy under the current configuration and the proposed project. The project was originally referred to as a rooming house, but after reviewing the requirements for rooming houses and multiple dwellings with planning and building staff, the applicant is proposing to meet the requirements for a multiple dwelling. This increases the off-street parking deficiency from the previous proposal as described above, but no longer exacerbates the existing deficiency in lot area. In terms of occupancy, the current 9-bedroom multiple dwelling would be limited to 14 occupants due to the existing off-street parking deficiency. The proposed 11-bedroom multiple dwelling would permit up to 26 occupants with a variance for off-street parking. The property is located in an R3 AA use district in which the proposed use is permitted. However, section 325.32 requires that an area variance be granted before a building permit is issued. Okay, and it looks like Matt and Josh are here. And I told them that I would kind of reiterate the change because it is a little technical with the code requirement. But as we were going through the board's question of occupancy, we found that we were applying the parking requirement for rooming house, but all the different space requirements for multiple dwelling, and looking at the different configurations. They agreed that they would like to consider this as a single unit multiple dwelling that will have additional bathrooms and possibly kitchenettes, but not full kitchens. This does increase the parking requirement, as I noted. So they have 2 on site right now, and they would be required to have 6. So we're increasing it to a request for 6 spaces. What as they noted in their narrative that was included in the revised materials, and this came up at our meeting last month, is they are open to including an occupancy limit on the variance, which was something that was discussed, and we were wondering about the legality of that. And the city attorney agrees that that is something that could be applied to the variance if the board wishes to do so. And I'll turn it back over to you all.
So appellants, would you like to present your case for 5 minutes?
I think.
Sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt anybody. We weren't planning to present anything tonight. We were thinking that just, in the interest of time, Megan's summary would probably suffice. You have the narrative. We already talked to you last time, so I think.
Okay, great. And we don't have anybody in favor or against, right? So.
Well, we conducted our public hearing last month, so we're kind of skipping ahead to any follow-up questions and deliberation.
Okay, are there any follow-up questions by members of the board?
So the updated proposal for total occupants is what, and what had you been open to at the last meeting, and why the change?
Josh, you want to get that? You're muted.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. I was wondering why that box didn't show up. Okay. Yeah, so because basically I thought about it after we sort of signed off, and I thought, well, what about, what if there are couples, like that want to live together, and, because originally we were talking about 11, but then I thought, well, with this kind of changing the kind of folks who would be living there, I kind of thought, well, we might get, some couples wanting to live there, like married couples and like that kind of thing. And so, so I didn't want to limit it to just 11, because then when I think couples would be great, to live there. And I think that would be a much better use than, the way it currently is. Now, obviously, I don't want, you know, if every room had a couple in it, that would be a lot of people, and that I don't think that would be good. But I just want to leave it open. And and honestly, I think you'll still probably end up mostly with just singles, but I just want to leave it open to the possibility of some couples. So, so that's why we came up with that, is basically just allowing for a few couples.
I think, Megan, it's correct that the room sizes are big enough to allow couples in most cases, in all cases, right?
Yeah.
You're muted, Megan.
Oh,
I tried the old space bar trick and it didn't work. Yes, that is correct. Under the building code, there is enough space in, I believe, almost all of the bedrooms to allow a couple.
Okay, and the proposal is, let me get this right. So is 14 right?
Under the current configuration with the parking that they have on site, my calculation is a multiple dwelling, they could have up to 14 people
Okay,
right
okay.
now.
With a variance for the off-street parking, it would be 26.
Without a any condition, yes, it could.
Okay.
And again, that's by housing code, so I'm not sure that that would be like the most that the applicant could choose to rent to.
Mhm. Well, since we already had the public hearing, would anybody like to make a motion? Or let me just first ask, are there any other questions, Stephanie or Stephen? No.
I have some questions.
Or you, David, of course.
Yeah. All right, so Megan, you're saying that as it stands without a variance, they could have 14 occupants, and under their current COC, they're limited to 11. So they could still go through with this renovation and get an uptick in residents without any variance required.
No, they would need, I mean, they could renovate the existing with 9 bedrooms. As I was digging through, in my evaluation of it, I would say that they could have 14 instead of 11. So if they did nothing and just said, you know, if the variance wasn't granted, I would probably amend the number that they could have on their CFC to be 14. After digging back through the files, looking through everything I could find, I would, in my determination, I would say they could have a 14-person occupancy in that building with no variance. So if for some reason the applicant decided just to do, to renovate some of the bedrooms or that kind of thing, he could have that without anything.
The occupant could still, or the applicant could still then do their renovation, get to the 11 bedrooms and have 14 occupants.
Not increase the bedroom count because the parking requirement is tied to the number of bedrooms. So you couldn't have more than 9 because they have established rights to the 9 bedrooms right now. They already have an existing deficiency, but they do have established rights to that occupancy right now. But to increase the bedroom count, they would need a variance.
And if we approve the variance, we can, are you saying if we approve the variance, then we would put a limitation on the 14, or we don't have to do that?
That's up to the board.
But if we didn't, is it 14 whether we put a limit or not, is my question.
It is 14 whether you put a limit or not. They
Okay.
have established rights to that, in my opinion. If you did not put a condition but granted the variance, they could technically have up to 26 people in there. But so if you wanted to limit that number.
Okay.
But you're right, they do have established rights to the 14.
Okay, we are just capping it. The idea would be, if you remember correctly from last month, the neighbors and their concern about the potential to have a lot of people living in that house. 26 people. Okay.
but we're asking for basically for 18 instead of 26. So yeah. So just so that we can have some couples, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, let me get this straight. It's been a long month. So instead of 14, you were asking us to limit it at 18. And Megan, can you remind me, where were we at the end of the meeting last time, as far as numbers?
At that time there was a different number for the established rights, which was 11. So I would say now they have, after digging into it more deeply, I think they have established rights to 14. At the time, Josh was willing to limit it to 11, but that wouldn't apply now because I would wouldn't recommend that because of the existing established rights. But so I think even if you limited it to 14 to keep that level consistent, that's one option, but that's something for the board to, I would not recommend to go lower than 11 or lower than the 14.
Then do we need a discussion here, or is someone ready to make a motion?
It's up to board members if they want anything lower than 18. If you see that as a detriment to, parking congestion on that street.
What do you think, Stephanie? I know you had some thoughts about it last time.
I think that at the proposed 18, it seems kind of a melding in the middle. And again, if we're trying to match it up with the restrictions on parking, that'll kind of tie everything together, I think, nicely. I just wanted to make sure at the time that we weren't going too far ahead, and again, being kind of short-term minded and thinking that now after this investigation or, getting those extra details, I think it's a little more holistic and well-rounded in the approach. So I think all parties will be pleased. And I think that again, the intent is to bring the building up to, addressing some of those deficiencies and making it, legitimately permitted property. So I think that it's, again, in everybody's best interest.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts by the board? And then who wants to make a motion?
I can make a motion.
Go ahead, David.
Remind me, right? So does that get seconded, or then I just read out what we got here? How does this work?
Make
It'll
your
just- yeah.
claim and then it gets seconded.
Okay. All right, so read through the list as we have it then, correct? Let me just pull up my sheet. All right, this is my, third time doing this, second time doing this? All right, so factors considered, just start from there, correct?
It would be good to start with, make a motion to grant or deny variance, that couple lines up.
Let's see. All right, I make a motion to vote in favor of the variance request. As far as factors considered, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties. No, the requested variance will allow the applicant to add additional bedrooms as part of a larger project to renovate the property and provide amenities to encourage individual tenants, as well as other occupants with varying family status. The overall number of occupants would change and would increase. However, this is not going to result in a detriment to the neighborhood in terms of its composition, overall framework of the neighborhood. Upon review of the proposed site plan and the board's review of existing conditions, the board finds that the project will not result in an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood. Number two, whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by a feasible alternative to the variance. No, there's no real way to construct new parking on site. Let's see. Whether the requested variance is substantial. Yes, in relation to the parking required per the zoning and the departure from that, it is a substantial variance. And to that end, we will predicate that the variance is granted conditioned on the limiting of the overall occupancy to the building to 18 individuals, though housing code would, in theory, allow for more. Number four, would the variance have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood? No, this is an urban environment on a busy street. Parking is limited as is, and therefore the reduction in the required parking, although conceivably would add to that congestion, has not been proven. The request for an area variance at 222 South Geneva Street has been predetermined not to have a significant impact on the environment and therefore the neighborhood. Whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, yes, the renovation was brought upon by the applicant, and the reconfiguring of rooms in the building was of their own choosing. Let's see here. However, the proposal will make the housing more functional and more adaptive to changing trends and market demands within our city. I move for the motion to vote in favor of this variance.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Megan, please poll the committee members.
And can I just confirm the number and the condition as the board proposing a limit on total occupants of 18 persons?
Correct. My motion states for limiting occupancy per the parking variance at 18 occupants and not to exceed.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Barkin,
Yes.
Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
Ms. Egan Engels,
Yes.
and Ms. Charles.
Yes.
So that is approval of the variance. You will be receiving written notification and proof of the approval for your files within the next few days. And then I will also transmit it to the code inspector to help you move forward with your building permits.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate this and appreciate your time.
Yeah, one quick question, Megan. Did we need a lot coverage variance too, or was that fine?
That's in there. So along with
Okay.
that, you got everything is in there. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You're very well done, David.
Yes. Great work.
Okay, Megan, do you want to call the next one?
Yes. Sorry, just opening, and then let me start to admit their. Okay, so appeal number 3180 for 614 South Meadow Street, 702 South Meadow Street, 710 to 734 South Meadow Street. Appeal of Francis L. Gorman III of Harris Beach PLLC on behalf of property owner GNI 9 Tops Ithaca Plaza LLC for an area variance from section column 5 off-street loading, column 7 lot width, column 11 front yard, and column 12 other front yard requirements of the zoning ordinance, as well as section 32520I parking in the southwest area. The project site includes 3 separate parcels, 614 South Meadow Street, 702 South Meadow Street, and 710 to 724 South Meadow Street that collectively are known as the Tops Plaza. The applicant proposes to reconfigure the site to create 4 separate parcels. Parcel A will be the largest lot and will include the 2 shopping center structures. Parcel B will encompass the current Chili's Bar and Grill. This parcel will have no street frontage and will be surrounded in its entirety by Parcel A. Parcel C will include the Elmira Savings Bank branch office, and Parcel D will include the current Verizon retail store. Off-street parking will be shared among all of the commercial uses on all parcels as permitted under section 32520D4 of the zoning ordinance, in a draft easement agreement that guarantees shared parking and site access among the 4 parcels has been submitted to the city. The proposed site subdivision creates a new rear yard deficiency of 0 of the required 18.7 feet, and that is for parcel D. The properties also have existing deficiencies in off-street loading, lot width, front yard, and other front yard requirements of the SW2 district that will not be exacerbated by the proposed subdivision. In addition, the properties currently do not meet section 32520I parking in the southwest area that mandates all parking areas be set back 100 feet from the curb if the front yard requirements are not met. These are also existing deficiencies that are not exacerbated by the proposed subdivision. The property is located in the SW2 use district in which the proposed uses are permitted. However, section 32532 requires an area variance be granted before a building permit is issued and the subdivision is approved. And I believe we have F, Al, and David Herrick here. Are there any other members of your team that should be joining you tonight? Okay.
You're muted. I think we've all done that at least once so far in this meeting. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? How about now? Is that good?
God, I muted. Yes, sorry.
Okay, good. Because then I couldn't hear you. I was like, great. I thought I pushed the right button. Okay. My name's Francis Gorman. I'm an attorney with the Harris Beach Law Firm, and we represent the owners of Tops Plaza. The official name is G&I Roman numeral 9 Empire Tops Plaza Ithaca LLC. And I'm here tonight with David Herrick of TG Miller. And this is in connection with appeal number 3180. And we have appeared before the Planning and Development Board. We were there the end of March in connection with our subdivision application. David's on the line, and if David wants, maybe he could, if you wanted, we can put up a site plan of the property. So you can just get a little visual of what we're talking about. And I think I see, David Herrick is there screen sharing. So presently, there are 3 tax parcels at the site. And I think this site was originally developed by Benderson Development in the late 80s, early 90s. The first piece was Tops Grocery Store and some retail stores to the south. The second parcel was where the Barnes Noble and Orange Theory is. And then there's a parcel out front, which at one point was First Niagara Bank and is now Elmira Savings Bank. So that the property's always had those 3 tax parcels. As part of this subdivision application, we are looking to separate the Chilais parcel, which is out front, the Elmira Savings Bank parcel, which is actually already its own parcel, but the tax map cuts off the parcel, and so it doesn't include the drive-through. So that's more of arguably a lot line adjustment. And then the third parcel that would be created would be the Verizon. So in fact, there would be, not to confuse you, there would be 5 parcels. So we'd have Chili's, Verizon, Elmira Savings Bank, which is currently already its own tax parcel. We're just doing a lot line adjustment. And then we'd have Tops, and then the Barnes & Noble and Home Goods. You wonder, one question is why is this necessary? Why are we doing it? We're finding that a lot of the restaurant owners and a lot of the tenants are looking to purchase their own properties. So with Chili's, we anticipate that the operator of that store will look to acquire that. And the size of that particular parcel is dictated by the lease agreement. And under the lease, we have the right to separate the parcel. With Elmira Savings Bank, we actually have an affirmative obligation to make sure the tax parcel matches the use of the part of the property. So we're just expanding it a little bit so we catch the drive-through. And then the Verizon parcel, we're separating that out, and that essentially would all self-park. And as Megan mentioned, we do have a reciprocal easement agreement, which we submitted as part of our subdivision application. And that would provide for shared parking and shared access. There will be no change in any of the existing conditions of the proposed parcels. We're not talking about putting any new buildings there. There's no change to the use, the development, the signage, visual, physical, or environmental conditions of the property. If somebody drove by, they wouldn't see any difference whatsoever. The neighbors aren't going to see any difference in the property. It's really just the internal lot lines are going to be changing. As to the variances, as Megan mentioned, we do have a front yard setback variance that we're asking for Chili's, Elmira Savings Bank, and Verizon. Again, these buildings already exist. So there are existing conditions. Chili's is about 38 feet from the lot line. Elmira Savings Bank is about 55 where it currently is. And we actually have one from the front lot line, and then there the setback in connection with the entrance off of South Meadow Street. And then with the Verizon building, the Verizon it roughly is 37 feet. And obviously we can't move those. We also have the lot frontage deficiency variances that we're asking for. And you guys probably totally appreciate this, but under your code, if you don't meet the front yard setback, you essentially don't comply with any of the lot frontage deficiency. And you have the lot frontage, you got to have at least 35% of the building covered in the lot width. If we sort of closed our eyes, pretended we didn't need a front yard setback on the lot frontage with Chili's right now, that covers 73% of the lot frontage. Elmira Savings Bank, it's 29%, but that doesn't include the drive-through. And then Verizon's 46%. And then we're also looking for a couple rear yard setbacks. One for Elmira Savings Bank. It's generally the rear yard needs to be 15% of the building height or 20 feet, whichever is less. Elmira Savings Bank is 18.4 feet to the rear property line. And Verizon, because there is a drive-through canopy on the Verizon parcel, there's I guess technically there is no rear yard setback, but as David Herrick is showing you, there is obviously some spacing there. And then, that's the entranceway off of Fair Memorial Drive there. As far as the 5-factor test, first of all, the granting of the variances, we would contend do not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to the nearby properties, because there's no new construction, no visual change. You drive by, you wouldn't see anything. There's no new signs going up or anything. So we do not believe there'll be any change whatsoever to the character of the neighborhood. Can the benefit sought by the applicant be achieved by some other method feasible to pursue? Because these are all existing buildings, there's really no other feasible method to other than the variances. Are the requested area variances substantial? If we did like a percentage measurement, we do not believe that they would be substantial. But there is some case law that has you look at whatever harm is produced from the variances. And we don't believe there's any associated impacts or harm with these variances because all the buildings are staying the same. There's no new construction. The fourth factor, the 5-factor test, is, will there be an adverse factor impact on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood or district? And we contend there will not be, because there's no physical, environmental, visual change to our proposal.
FL, can I stop you here for a moment?
Yes.
I think we have and I think most of us have read through your responses to the 5 factors, and thank you so much for doing that.
You're welcome.
Think we can stop that right now because we've read it, and I think we can understand it. So I think perhaps right now, if we could move ahead to the us asking you questions portion of this, if that's okay with you.
That is fine.
Okay, I have a question for you. So,
yes.
Your application states 4 parcels, but you just said 5. Is it 4 or 5?
The summary of the application does say 4 parcels, but they're actually 5 parcels. And I think the confusion is we consider one of the parcels sort of the mother parcel, which is the Tops and the Barnes and Noble, the home goods store, but that currently is 2 separate tax parcels. So we're really not changing those tax parcels at all. The Chili's is being born out of the home goods Barnes and Noble tax parcel. The Verizon is that mother parcel is the Tops, and then the Elmira Savings Bank is already its current tax parcel.
Okay, Megan, does that make sense for the materials that we have?
Well, so that's not what was presented in the application materials. I was under the impression that what is currently the parcel that was going to, that is currently separate, that has Barnes and Noble on one and then Tops on the other. I was under the impression that they were being consolidated because they're labeled as, that's all labeled as parcel A. So the information in the table, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head if there's other deficiencies for those parcels, because I evaluated them together as opposed to separately. So, I mean, I guess the short answer is that no, the information you have is not 100% accurate, but I can't tell you at this point whether that produces any additional variances or not without looking at it further. And
How do you suggest we proceed then? I would hate to go through this hearing and then miss something that was important.
I mean, would you like us? Yeah, I mean, whatever you think would be best.
So, and maybe this question for David, the parcel on the maps that we went through, because we have it labeled as parcel A, which is the core parcel. Parcel B is Chili's, parcel C is Elmira Savings, and parcel D is Verizon. So am I correct now that parcel A is really 2 parcels?
There's probably a history here behind the creation of the tax map parcels for what we're calling parcel A. That doesn't have anything to do with a subdivision, but rather was likely done for the benefit of tax bill apportionment. And I get FL could perhaps speak to this, but it's more than likely that at some point in the history of this property, there was the creation of these individual tax map parcels simply for tax appropriation purposes.
So just looking at it quickly, I can see that the top portion of parcel A, where Barnes and Noble is, has an existing rear yard deficiency that I did not include in there. So we would want to add that in. But otherwise, I mean, just a quick look again with the easement agreement for the parking, that's not really an issue. And otherwise, I imagine it would be, but we'll want to add, again, I thought that line was disappearing as part of this with 4 parcels. So if the board wants to proceed, I would say you can do that, adding in the rear yard. And then I can confirm, I mean, the south, other than the somewhat challenging southwest front yard requirements, the other requirements are less stringent than some of our zones. So I would say you definitely need to add in that rear yard on that first parcel, but otherwise my initial very quick analysis says it'll probably meet the other requirements, so.
Perhaps we could ask if there's any other concerns and maybe table it with all the correct deficiencies and do a public hearing today, if people are here about it, and kind of do what we've done similarly with other appeals, and then bring it back once we have all the final details about the additional parcel. Does that make sense?
I would agree.
Sure. So we can go ahead with the public meeting now. And I suppose if we assume what Megan just said in all her planning wisdom, that really just the existing rear yard deficiency on the mother parcel, or what is it, parcel A, that maybe we can proceed forward so we can quicken this up when we table it and it comes back and we vote on it, right? Okay, so let's just move ahead with the public meeting then. So does the board have any questions for the appellants?
I had one. Is there any new construction in the works, and how would these new parcels, play into those plans? I mean, what type of opportunities are opened up by doing this?
There's no new construction plan for any of the parcels that are being subdivided, which is Chili's, the Verizon, and Elmira Savings Bank.
And I suppose I have a question for Megan. So I suppose in a case like this, we'd be a little concerned of granting this, and then maybe something changes, something's built later on, relying on this. But am I correct that if, say, Chili's, if they wanted to demolish the Chili's and build something else, then it would have to go through this again for those, is that correct, for the deficiencies?
Yes, I mean, if something happened and rebuilt in Chili's exact footprint, they would not need to come back. But say they wanted to build, I don't know, something that there was no setbacks whatsoever and filled the entire lot or something like that, yes, then they would need to come back and get a different variance. So that's a different project. And I mean, that's the same with any of them. If there's a, major addition to one of the shopping centers that would make one of the deficiencies worse, they'll need to come back and visit us again to talk through that. So,
okay. So if
you're
there's
right.
no change right now, there can't be a change without coming back to us, right?
Well, we're talking about changes that, for the most part, I think of what you're thinking of, yes, that's correct. But there can be small changes to the lot. So for example, if it doesn't change the building footprint, if they do something to, say,
Renovate the interior.
Maybe add outdoor seating at Chili's or something like that. Those are things that could happen without an additional variance. Does that make sense?
So any other questions from the board?
I have one. So you said the subdivision would create a rear yard deficiency with the Elmira Savings Bank. Why wouldn't you just move the lot line 2 feet back to meet that requirement?
We were trying to comply with the current tax parcel. I mean, that's essentially where the rear lot line matches the current tax parcel. And really what we're doing here is just expanding the tax parcel to the north so that we can capture the drive-through and the exit area for the drive-through.
Can you confirm which side of the lot is considered the rear yard?
The rear yard is where the thick line there is the rear yard or is the proposed line. And then my understanding is that the lighter colored line there is the existing line. So the existing rear yard is a little bit further out and it's coming in closer towards Meadow Street a little bit. But then it's expanding further to the north.
And that was done just for practical purposes so that the the access road between these curbed islands and the parcel line for Elmira Savings Bank would be essentially all of that parent parcel. So as opposed to having a little sliver of property that extended out past the curb of the improvements for the savings bank.
Okay.
I think though, Stephen's question makes sense. So that's the one that just had the adjustment, but the Chili's, I suppose just to follow through with that line of thinking, like for example, for the Chili's, why didn't you configure the lot so that it didn't have these deficiencies?
The Chili's lease has a meets and bounds legal description.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Do we, Megan, sorry, I always forget the for and against who goes first, but do we have either?
We actually do not have, we did not receive any letters in either opposition or support. And we also, we do not have anyone here to speak either. Sorry, I just keep going back to this to see if I can calculate it off the top of my head quickly to save everybody from having to come back again. I would say, again, going back to this, that I believe that the only deficiency by separating the two parcels out so that there's 5. So will be that rear yard on the top part of that lot where Barnes and Noble is. You can see where Home Goods is. It's really close to that back line. I don't have the exact dimension though. But I would say that's the only one. There's no side setback requirements. And for that parcel, the front is set back more than 100 feet from the curb. So that meets the other option for the southwest. So if the board is comfortable, I would say that that is based on my analysis, what I would see for that second lot there.
Okay, and I suppose, is it all right with the board if we continue with the assumption of what Megan just said is correct? And I suppose, Megan, if it's not, then we would come back and talk about this again.
Yes, I would beg my forgiveness from all of you and bring you back again, but.
Okay, so let's close the public hearing and now we will deliberate.
Could I
So
read the planning board?
Oh, sure, of course. I didn't see that in here.
That's okay. So from the planning board, their recommendation is the planning board does not identify any negative long-term planning impacts and supports this appeal. The proposed subdivision does not change the layout of the site and therefore has no impact.
Great. Okay, what are you thinking, board members?
We've seen other properties like this come up before. Seems pretty straightforward to me. I think the only perspective that I have is that I just want to make sure that outside of the decision, if something were to be drastically different, what does that actually mean from our procedural end? That's more of a question for Megan, but I think logistically, and again, the material presented, we've seen, again, similar properties where they've wanted to separate, subdivide. I think that there's no concern, right? They're not adding or changing. And if they did, they'd have to come and revisit and go through the process all over again. So the deficiencies that are currently existing, they're not going to be exacerbated by just a subdivision. We're just looking at it as separate individual properties now instead of one big entity, and I don't see any issues.
To answer Stephanie's question, I would say if for some reason there was are you meaning like if I missed yeah, so in that case, I would bring it back to you next month. We would put it under the continued appeals section at the start of our agenda and correct any of those errors. But again, it's up to the board if you're comfortable proceeding. That if you'd like to wait.
Too? Is that
I'm
okay?
sorry?
You want to double check with the applicant too as well? Like, would they just rather us table and have everything correct so they don't have to reappear? Or, I don't know.
Well, I think the way this is going is that if it's correct, they won't reappear. If it's not correct, they will. So there's nothing to lose by moving forward with it now, right? Applicants, are you okay with that?
We're okay with that, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
100% chance of having to come back next month or 50-50? Any other thoughts? I mean, I just think it's nothing's changing with the form of the built environment down there. It's going to look the same way it did before this and after it. But anything else? Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion. All right, for appeal number 3180 for 614 South Meadow Street, 702 South Meadow Street, 710 to 734 South Meadow Street, and zoning district SW2. Let's see. Factors considered: whether an undesirable change would be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties. No. Changing lot lines on the ground doesn't change anything about the neighborhood. Whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by a feasible alternative to the variance. I mean, sure, they could mess with the lines some more, but I don't think that would have the effect that they're trying to get. Whether the requested variance is substantial, I don't think that is substantial. They range in significance from 9 to 100% of the requirement. No physical changes to the site. Would the variance have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood? No. It underwent environmental review by the Planning and Development Board, acting as lead agency. They determined it wouldn't have a negative impact on the environment. Again, it's just changing lot lines. And whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, yes, it was. They could not subdivide it. However, there's no physical changes, so I don't think there's any issue with that. So I move to grant the variance.
There a second?
I'll second.
Megan, please poll the members.
Okay, Mr. Barkin,
Yes.
Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
Ms. Egan Engels,
Yes, with any additional rear yard setbacks that are discovered or any other deficiencies that are determined in a more thorough review, still, yes, I would go forward.
Ms. Charles.
Yes.
All right, so the variance with the 5 parcels with the rear yard on the Barnes and Noble site, the more northernmost one, is approved. I will follow up, David and FL, with you just to confirm that this is all set in what we need, and then we will get you the final approval so that you can go ahead and move forward with the subdivision.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great evening.
Are you ready to do the next appeal?
Yeah, sorry. You're ready for me? Yeah. Please, Megan, call our next appeal.
Okay. Appeal number 3181 for 232 to 236 Dryden Road. Appeal is Stream Collaborative on behalf of property owner Lux Ithaca Holdings LLC for an area variance from section 325(8), column 10% lot coverage by buildings of the zoning ordinance. The applicant previously proposed to construct a 4-story, 8-unit apartment building at the property located at 232 to 236 Dryden Road. The property has 2 existing buildings on the parcel, and the applicant would like to construct a 3rd building on the eastern portion of land between Dryden Road and Summit Avenue, to be known as 238 Dryden Road. The addition of the third building created a deficiency in the lot coverage by buildings in rear yard requirements of the zoning ordinance. A variance was previously granted on October 1st, 2019 for the percentage of lot coverage and rear yard requirements for the proposed building. The building was then reconfigured to accommodate a fire department access area which encroaches into the rear yard. The applicant sought new area variances for the reconfigured building, and the board granted these variances on February 4th, 2020. The applicant now wishes to subdivide the property to create 2 lots. Lot 1 is 232, 236 Dryden Road will include the 2 existing multiple dwellings, and Lot 2, 238 Dryden Road will be the site of the new multiple dwelling. The proposed subdivision creates new zoning deficiencies for both lots. Lot 1 will have a lot coverage by buildings of 55.5%, which exceeds the 50% allowed in the district by 5.5%. This lot will now meet the rear yard requirement of the zoning ordinance. Lot 2 will have a lot coverage by buildings of 53.6%, exceeding the allowed amount by 3.6%. The rear yard deficiency will remain and is allowed under the February 2020 variance BZA number 3150. The property is located in a CR4 use district in which the proposed use is permitted. However, section 325.38 requires that an area variance be granted before a building permit is issued and the property can be subdivided. And I am going to admit our applicants now. All right, so I see Patrick and Brandon here. Are there any other members of your team joining?
No, it's just us.
Okay,
Okay, great. Go ahead, and you have 5 minutes to present your case.
I'll let Brandon take the lead.
Okay, so I see a few new faces in here since we've been through this round a few times. Stephanie, I know you've seen this project through once before. Megan, you had some familiarity, and I don't know if the other 3 of you have. So basically, we're, as Megan stated in the beginning there, we're kind of back on what I see as a little bit of a technicality reapproval process, in the sense that the client and applicant is requesting for a subdivision to help with simplifying some of the logistics in terms of property maintenance, accounting, et cetera, which is what sparked dividing the lots. As a result of that, we are still in need to request of the lot coverage overages that existed previously, as well as the rear setback deficiency that existed previously. We don't see that this changes anything fundamentally of the project as it's been proposed since 2019. The lot coverage overage, obviously, of course, is somewhat self-inflicted in the sense that the proposed project is creating the issue, but it's looked at as kind of a benefit and an asset to the College Town area in terms of what they want to see up there with the infill vacant spaces in lots and so forth, keeping students up in that area, creating convenience and safe housing as a result. So that's basically what's bringing us here tonight, is to go back through that process in hopes that we can proceed forward and get the reapproval of these variances again, so that we can get back to the planning board and get our subdivision in line so that we can move forward with the building permit and construction.
Okay, board members, do you have questions for the appellants? I was here. I've seen this at least twice. I was there.
I wasn't sure if I thought I might have remembered you, and I was like, I wasn't sure.
It was pre-COVID. I look different.
Yeah.
That's okay. Any questions? Stephen and David, Stephanie.
Can you just quickly refresh my memory and confirm there was two new buildings that were being added?
Just one.
Just one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can do a share screen and show you the lot layout if you'd like.
I think that would be helpful, yes.
Bring us through the history of from conception of the original projects all the way to this. That'd be really helpful. And then the variances received along the way.
So what I'll first do is show you guys what the current site plan looks like. So you have some familiarity and context. This is up in Collegetown, right off of Dryden. Dryden Road is here. Oak Ave is up here to the north. And Summit Ave here is this short dead end access road to basically provide access into some of these lots up here. The applicant owns this lot in its entirety as it's displayed here in what I've highlighted in red to kind of help clarify the delineation. And this is the site as it exists currently. This is what's known as 114 Summit Ave. This is known as 112 Summit Ave as they are addressed. The projects as they were proposed was known as 232 and 236 Dryden Road. So there's just a little bit of a, there's a double naming of it, but legally and from a mailing standpoint, this is 112, 114. For the third building, this is the parcel that is being requested to be created. So the 238 Dryden Road project would sit within this small footprint of a lot. And the logical subdivision is this line here, basically taking it straight down to Dryden Road. So that, that's kind of how the site sits in its current configuration. I'm going to jump quickly to this, which shows you the footprint of the proposed building, which is outlined in essentially this red line in here. This is the 238 building that would construct within the vacant space as it currently exists. The part of the proposal of this project required review with the fire department, of course, as they all do for fire access. As a result of that, Tom Parsons had expressed some concern over this building, the proposed building, potentially creating a slight access issue in terms of fire fighting to, if there was an event at 112 Summit Ave. So as a result of that, we worked with him, which is what sparked us to go in round 2 of our variance. As a result of this dedicated fire lane was created. It comes all the way down to here. And this building bump out, as you see it, used to exist on this side. And to accommodate this, this was flipped over here. And what this space is basically it's a bedroom to one of the units that, rather than it fitting into this space, we now had to shift it over here. This fire lane, through Tom Parsons' review, was recommended that we go to the state to get an access variance because the width up to the center point of Summit, which is part of what is a common or controlled area of the applicant, be approved by the state, because it was like 18 inches deficient in the required width. Tom Parsons didn't have an issue with that, was in support of that variance. We presented the issue and the concerns to the state. They approved the 2 variances that were up for request. So that created this dedication of this fire lane. That brought us back to the BZA to reapprove this new configuration, which is currently how the project still remains to be proposed and built. The new element, of course, is now this creation of a lot line that runs between the 2 buildings, creating a separate parcel and separation between the proposed 238 and the existing 112 and 114, which those 2 existing buildings will remain on their own lot. Those won't be further subdivided as we sit here today. So I think that is kind of the quick history of it in terms of where it started and how we got to where we currently are with this proposal.
So under the former approvals, you were good to go and ready for a building permit to build that structure 238 without a
Correct. Yeah, in fact, we were actually in the stage of, we had already started, we were getting into the ramping up stage of construction documents with that. Of course, we did sit tight for a little while as things changed in the world, of course, with COVID and so forth. So things were sitting idle, and then we ramped back up. And then I think, and if Patrick, you wanted to step in to explain where the subdivision came into the mix of all of this.
Yeah, like Brandon said, it's a question of property management and accounting. Because the project is going to be individually financed, 238 rather, is going to be individually financed from the rest of the lots. We wanted to make sure that to keep everything super clean, there would be its own parcel. All the financing would be tied to that. All the accounting that we have internally for property management, construction expenses would be tied to that parcel. So it just makes everything easier. And to reiterate, we're not proposing any changes in the building footprint from what was already approved. We just had to go through the variance process again because of the subdivision.
But it's still doable for you as an outfit to proceed and just navigate a more frustrating accounting process, correct? There's nothing actually preventing you from still going forward, even though they'd all be tied?
I mean, it makes our lives a lot easier in terms of keeping those costs separate.
Okay.
Any other questions, Stephanie? Stephen? No? Okay, then let's.
One more, Suzanne.
Oh, go ahead, David.
Could you guys sort of bring me up to speed on what the variance process was like when you originally went? Those 2 times, was it contentious at all? Were there complaints? How did that process go forward for you?
Well, it was definitely more complicated than it probably needed to be in terms of our side of things. There's a couple of neighbors where my cursor is here. I believe this is, I think this is 109, and then the neighbor over here. There's an ongoing historical concern or issue, I guess, over the loss of what was seen by some of the neighbors as, their entitlement to have parking and so forth. So there was issues raised over the loss of that throughout the process that we showed. And I should say too, also a public access issue. So before any of these buildings were built, this was a big parking lot that predominantly just served the school to the north. And I think some of these property owners also used it as overflow parking for their tenants, which is where some of the disgruntlement came from them. Additionally, there was a public access staircase that was extremely dilapidated and actually posed a liability for anybody who owned the property because it was an old railroad tied staircase that kind of existed in this location here, but it didn't actually reach Dryden Road. It just stopped and started on the steep hillside. And then in order for you to get to Dryden Road, you had to kind of navigate a steep vegetated slope and then jump over down this 3-foot wall to get down here to this sidewalk. And in previous and even in this attempt, I think you guys received documentation and argumentation regarding this access and the trying to point out that the applicant here is trying to shy away from dealing with that and so forth, which is not the case.
If I can jump in here, we want there to be a public access between Summit Avenue and Dryden Road. I'm an urban planner myself. I'm all about non-motorized mobility. So having that staircase there for foot access is exactly what we want. So and if you want to go even more historic, this used to be the site of the Cascadilla Schoolhouse, like dorms that used to be associated with the school itself. But that building was totally disfigured over the course of history. And so when we originally built the first Lux, the first two Lux buildings, we tried to give a nod to the original 1880s, 1890s architecture that was originally on the site. So in overall, what we're doing with these projects is both respecting the history of this site and implementing what Ithaca has made clear for what it wants the vision of Collegetown to be, which is infill housing that's safe, modern, isn't those 1870s like fireboxes like I used to live in when I was a student at Cornell. And yeah, in terms of the disgruntlement with the neighbors, we've gone to court and we've had things found in our favor for this project. And so, for instance, the letter that you received tonight, a lot of those issues have already been addressed and adjudicated through site plan review and earlier variance processes and in court. And pretty much all what we want to do now is to draw that new imaginary line between what's one parcel to become two parcels.
And if your variance were to be denied or tabled, would you still plan to go through with your project as it is and approved?
It would be like more hassle to do. So I'll reiterate, what we're asking for will not change the ultimate built environment. It'll make the financing and the management of the properties a lot easier just by virtue of them being their own parcels. It's kind of similar to what's going on with the Meadow Street applicant, where they want to take one parcel that's there and split it up. The variances that we're asking for instance, with the rear yard setback, that was something that we did under the direction of the fire chief, Tom Parsons. And in terms of the lot coverage, it's such a minuscule amount that really doesn't affect a person's experience, whether they're living in the building or walking down the street or driving past. And ultimately is in the spirit of what the Collegetown form-based code wants to see in the future.
I have a quick question. Did it, it's hard to decipher on the plan here. Did you add an additional staircase or walkway on the east side of 238?
No, so the improved, this is actually an egress access court for the building for, you know, in case there's a fire in this building, they can come out and get out.
Okay.
Where we have the public access, which is already in existence, it exists on site currently today, is this walkway, which is much safer. It's maintained by the applicant in the winter months and so forth. So it's a safe way to get from Summit down to Dryden Road. That was a condition of approval under the previous variances that be maintained for public access. The applicant has expressed and agreed, you know, had expressed interest and agreed to do that. They've never wanted to hinder that. They realized the convenience of it. It's kind of a nice feature, but now people can do it safely without it becoming, you know, a liability issue. So that exists here. And this that you see over here is actually access for the proposed building.
And by building that stairway between, or keeping that stairway open between two buildings, we're essentially also bringing back to life that historic connection that existed between Summit Ave and Dryden Road, which again had kind of deteriorated over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to fill David in a little bit, there were some pictures that at least I had seen and reviewed, and it was a dilapidated stairway, and there was kind of a out of, again, to maintain, it seemed like to maintain the property and use what was existing, it was already being rebuilt without the variance and agreement. There, you know, there was some good faith, I think, in that effort, but I feel that all of the issues for access have been addressed, and those were some of the things that we talked about in the previous variances. It's well lit, it's maintained, they agreed to maintain it, they maintain it and own it, and it helped with that concern for the neighbors.
Any other questions by the board? Okay, so this next will be the those in support, followed by those what's the word? In opposition, yes.
Okay, so we did not receive any written comments in support of the variance, and we do not have anyone signed up to speak in support. In terms of opposition to the project, you all should have received 2 letters from attorneys representing interested parties. One was from Ray Schlatter representing ENP Associates that are at 320 Dryden Road, and the other one was from Edward Crossmore, who represents the owners of 109 Summit Avenue. Those are both pretty extensive, so we're not going to read those into the record, but Mr. Schlatter did sign up to speak, and I see that he is here in the waiting room, so I'm going to admit him in for his 3 minutes, and I will time that for you all so you don't have to keep track. All right. Can you hear us, Ray?
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So I'm Ray Schlatter, and I'm an attorney here in town. I've lived here for over 45 years and went to school and still live in the city and love this community. We have submitted to you the letter of March 23rd, and it does have attached, for those of you who are historical buffs, a aerial photograph. It's Exhibit D, which is there, and that is an aerial photograph of Summit Avenue as it existed in 1920. It was a through street. It had cars could travel and pedestrians walked. The city paved that street. The city runs water and sewer up and down the street. Mr. Applicants referred to this as being merely a mere technicality. I would suggest that it is more a bait and switch. And the reason I say that is because in 2018, when the original application was made to construct 112 and 114 Summit Avenue, this south end of Summit Avenue, which by the way is burdened by encroachments of all of the neighboring properties on Summit Avenue, and this is still in litigation. We just argued in the appellate division about a month ago. We're waiting a decision, but all of when the application for variances were made back in 2018, I've mentioned in my papers, they referred to that south end as a pocket park. There were photographs showing it as green space. Why? Because we have zoning for a reason. We have zoning in order to maintain an equilibrium in terms of density and green space. And what's happened here is that the applicant first used that green space in order to leverage the construction of 112 and 114 Summit Avenue. And then once those buildings were done, they came across and said, okay, now we're going to put a building in this green space. And it's just wrong. And the fact that, and now they used that when they consolidated the parcels, they used the area from the other parcel to enhance and to secure the variance for this spun off eastern parcel. And now what they're doing is they want to subdivide, and not only subdivide, but they're adding another apartment. Mr. Crossmore has correctly pointed out that the basement of this new building is actually going to increase the density from what had been here before. So I know you folks, I know it's a lot easier for you to say, this is, we've already decided this. There's no reason for us to go back and revisit all these issues. But I'm asking you, they are increasing the density. This is an area that is overburdened. The reason they had to go back and get that variance before was because the fire safety was not adequate. They ended up getting a variance in order to get the fire safety accommodated because they don't own the eastern side of Summit Avenue, and on and on and on.
That's 3 minutes, Mr. Slaughter.
I just one final thing. I want to incorporate the prior records of the proceedings that were generated in October of 2019, as well as in February of 2020, because no matter which way you decide, my guess is there will be further litigation. And I want to make sure the record adequately reflects that all of those materials are part of this appeal.
Okay, thank you. Any others in opposition, Megan?
No, the 2 written comments and Mr. Slaughter.
Okay.
were here to speak, so.
And we have copies of the written comments. Megan, is there a statement from the planning board?
Yes, there is. The board does not identify any long-term planning issues with this proposal and supports the appeal. The board approved the new building in 2020, and the applicant has agreed to establish an easement for public access for the pedestrian stair from Summit Ave to Dryden Road.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing, and now we'll have our deliberation. So David, Stephen, and Stephanie, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking of this as just another lines on a map variance. But I mean, whether we vote on it or not doesn't affect whether this project gets completed. It just makes the accounting easier or harder for them.
I disagree with that sentiment. That's the obligation of the property owner and the risk they take on. It's a part of the business. So if it doesn't prevent the project from going through, it's ultimately up to them if they pursue this or not. They have an approved project as is, and defining the hardship as a hassle from an accounting perspective, I don't think meets the requirement of hardship. So to that end, I'll likely vote against this. Is my inkling. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts that would sway me differently, or that it would ultimately sink the variance. I don't know.
Sorry. I think I'd look at it as a slightly different way that, so yes, they can do the project the way it is now, but that doesn't preclude them for going for this variance. And I think if we look at sort of a similar to rationale to what we applied to the last one of, well, is anything substantively built environment wise changing with granting this variance? I think so. You have a problem with the of the 5 factors of the which one are you having a problem with? Is this self-created? Yes. But what was the other one? So we look at like adverse impact on physical environmental conditions. Is it substantial? Can it be achieved with a feasible alternative? I suppose that's where you're saying, yeah, the feasible alternative is not doing it. Whether an undesirable change would be produced. I guess I don't see it as though the reason for this variance has to be that they couldn't do it otherwise, right? Unless my thinking is off on that. What are you guys thinking? Stephanie?
I was just reconsidering that I'm not sure the exact year, but I know that it was redistricted or rezoned. And if you look at the way that it's the map, you can see there's a nice color code, like zoom in, bird's eye view, and it shows kind of like the College Town main strip as the more urban and developed section, and then these neighboring kind of almost like I don't use this term a lot, so it seems a little strange, but like wrapping your arms around a little bit is trying to kind of make that transition zone. So from the very urban areas of College Town to slightly less so, but again, that infill and transition into the more, again, different areas that have a different feel in the neighborhood. I think that the intent there is where this project was going. I don't see any, again, focusing on the big picture, is there really anything that's detrimental? No, it's been rezoned for that. It's within the property ownership that they can develop the property. Yes, there's some slight deficiencies that we're here to talk about if they do subdivide. So there's the, I forget which side it is, but one of the sides has a deficiency. It's within a few feet. Some could consider that in detriment or worsening a condition, but there are other similar properties that are, there's kind of a varying staggeredness. And then the lot area, history or not, but again, kind of that infill and the significance. It's, yes, slightly more, but is it astronomical? No, it's within the single digits. I'm just, again, kind of focusing on that kind of larger view, just to help recalibrate the conversation. I don't have any issues with having a subdivision. Again, I just see the overall project still meeting all the criteria. And again, working through the variance with the fire department, again, that's about safety, and sometimes that's just the way it is. You initially look at it and you think it's one way, but in fact you look at it in more depth and it's close, but we have to rearrange things, and I'll be okay with it because our trucks can meet it, or there's enough hose line or the connections, that's fine, but you still need a variance at a different level. I think it's just, again, going through all the proper steps to make sure that it meets everybody's expectations and that it's safe to build and that it can be done. I don't see any issues. I still don't see any issues with this.
Mm-hmm. And I agree. So we need 3. So, I think we can still go forward with the vote here. I also just want to point out that, we, in the last 2 times this went through this board, we talked about the pocket park. We talked at length about the connection between Summit. I'm looking at the image here of the connection. I mean, I think that, I don't think we need to discuss all of that unless you guys completely disagree with me in this. Okay, so
I forget, was there any additional comments or a revision from the planning board with the new proposed project? I don't think so. Is that correct?
No, Megan read it just a moment ago, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay, then I guess I just want to disclose that Patrick, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a professor in the the program that you graduated from, and I'm glad to see you back from your stint at Harvard. But I'm just disclosing that I'm not going to recuse because I don't benefit in any way from this, but I just want to disclose that. Okay, what's next? So. Who does anybody want to make a motion?
I could give it a try. Give me some patience while I pull up the material. Okay, I think I have enough to get started. I'd like to make a motion in the variance that's being requested for the property for a subdivision considered 112 and 114 Summit Ave to now contain 2, Megan, help me out, I don't see it.
Do you have the form, Stephanie?
I don't have it.
Okay, I'm gonna send it to you right now, just so you have it as a reference. Just 1 second.
Megan emailed it, must have been about 5 o'clock or so today.
232, 236?
Yes, 232, 236.
236, Dryden Road. For the request of, in regards to the variance for section 325 -8, column 10. In regards to, oh man, where's the? Variance for lot coverage. I think that's the only one. Is that correct for lot coverage?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, lot coverage. My findings are as follows. Patience, my apologies. I don't have a big enough screen to have multiple things open at once. Whether an undesirable change would be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to the nearby property. No, much like the other reviews, there's no substantial change in the project itself. It's just a matter of reissuing property lines. Again, this, even with the reading of the statement from planning board and through our findings, there's no long-term detriment or impact to the properties. Whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by a feasible alternative to the variance. Yes, I mean, they could not subdivide, but the request is, again, through the findings of a small percentage in the lot coverage difference. It's not necessarily substantial. 3, whether the request variance is substantial. I kind of just hinted at that. Again, the difference between 50% versus the original, or I guess the initial request at 55, and now this one changing the configuration to make the access road for the fire department, as well as their, to meet their needs for the building project at 55.5% for lot area coverage, is still a pretty small amount, as we've found previously through review of this property. Again, this is not a substantial request. Would the variance have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood? No. In fact, again, reviewing the planning board as the review agency, they determined that there is no detriment to the neighborhood or negative impact. And again, focusing on the infill projects, and that this rezoning has allowed for this type of development, that there's no additional concerns. Whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, again, yes, otherwise they wouldn't be here. But in some regards, because of the secondary review from the fire department, and that it had to go through another process to be submitted back to us, again, because of those changes, not necessarily totally self-created, but working through all of that and need to be reviewed with us again. And again, based on those findings, I propose that we issue the variances.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great. Megan, can you poll the members?
Mr. Barkin,
No.
Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
Ms. Egan Engels,
Yes.
Ms. Charles.
Yes.
So the variance request has been approved by the board, and I will provide a written approval of your variance, and we'll transmit it to both you as the applicants as well as the building division, and allow you to go through with your subdivision process.
Great. Thank you all so much. It was
Thanks,
nice.
everyone. Nice to see you guys. Thanks.
Bye.
So Megan, please let our next in.
Sorry, Submit our applicants. So we are on appeal number 3182 to 215 North Meadow Street. Appeal of Jason Demras on behalf of property owners Chris Kim and So Young Lee for an area variance from section 325-8, column 4, off-street parking requirements of the zoning ordinance. The applicant proposes to renovate the existing structure at 215 North Meadow Street to operate a restaurant in the space that was previously used by a convenience store. The interior of the structure will be altered to accommodate the restaurant use, and the applicant proposes site changes to include restriping the existing parking area, installing planters, and screening the dumpster area. The restaurant use requires more off-street parking than the previous retail use. The zoning ordinance requires 1 off-street parking space for every 50 square feet of net floor area of assembly space. The restaurant will require 22 off-street parking spaces, and the applicant proposes to provide 17 spaces on site. No additions to the building or other alterations to the building footprint are proposed, and the property meets all other requirements of the zoning ordinance. The property is located in the WEDZ 1B use district, in which the proposed use is permitted. However, section 325-32 requires that an area variance be granted before a building permit is issued. And we have Jason Demras, and I believe Chris Kim is here as well. Anyone else joining you this evening?
I think this is it. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, you have 5 minutes to present your case.
All right, I'm going to share my screen just to walk you through it. All right. Everyone see the screen? Okay. So I think everyone's familiar with the site. It's the old Burn Dairy convenience store. You know, a lot of asphalt, but you know, a fair amount of parking on site. Existing condition, as Megan described, you know, the project is to convert this to a restaurant. Let me jump over here. You saw this in the submission, existing survey. I think the street view does a little bit better job, but building in the lower right-hand corner. And let me just get to the proposed plan. So really, we're not doing too much to the site. Trying to squeeze out one more parking space on the top here where you see 5. Actually striping some spaces over here where there's ample room, and then adding some planters just to dress up the site, which is a lot of, you know, a sea of asphalt at the moment. The parcel's a little complicated with curb cut on Buffalo, and then actually 2 curb cuts on Meadow, which is the one-way north. And it's a little tight in here to maintain a walkway. There's bollards already in there, wood bollards. So what we would like to do is keep the ability to drive through open. So it was this spot right here that made the 18, but we're really asking for the 17 total. So 8, 5, 3, and 1 technically. That's really it. It's really just converting an existing space, but as Megan noted, the use changes the parking requirement. Actually, I'm going to jump back here to the street view. There's on the other side of the fast track, there is a city lot. So there's plenty of parking in the neighborhood, street parking, and then hopefully people arriving via other means. So I think that's really it. Pretty simple, straightforward. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, committee members, do you have any questions?
No questions.
I guess I do. On Buffalo Street, is there street parking on that block of Buffalo?
I believe there is. I can actually go over there if you'd like. Yeah, actually both sides. And then there is Washington Square Park, which is about a block away, looks like that has quite a bit of parking on the north-south streets. So yeah, it's a mixture.
Mhm.
I didn't count the seats, but how many people can be seated in the restaurant?
Let me see, I forget exactly what our count was. I think it was around 66 was the count, right in that range.
But parking requirements are determined, maybe it would make sense to determine them by seats, but it's determined by square foot. So that's how we get to the, I'm sorry, what was it again? You have 17 spots. What is the requirement?
It's 50 square feet.
Yeah, what is the
per-
total number required?
22 is required.
Okay.
So we're looking for a variance for the deficiency of 5.
And I trust that you tried to squeeze 5 more spots on that site somewhere.
Yeah, you can actually see the aerial photo below. So I drew the ADA unload. I forgot to mark that, but this is the ADA spot. I drew that to code size and got as many in as I could, but we'd need a off-street loading space. So that limited what we could do there. And then again, there's currently 4 striped up here, but we can actually get 5 code compliant, zoning compliant spaces there. And then this one, I suppose, could be functional at times, if it's really, really busy. But again, it's a little awkward, getting in and out of the site. So it might be nice to just keep a cut through, especially if someone comes from Buffalo and they want to sneak through and get a spot over here.
Would shrinking so I guess the other option would be to shrink the dining area by 250 square feet. Is that's your other option here to be in compliance?
Correct, right. I think yeah, so there's an existing division in the space right here. So we kept the seating up to the north and then added a vestibule and the host stand, tried to carve out as much as we could to reduce the seat count to get those parking figures to work. The difficulty is the building is a set size, and the last thing we want to do is start demolishing the building just for the sake of parking compliance. And I think a big factor is if we were doing this across the street, there wouldn't be a parking requirement. It's when you come over to this side where the parking kicks in. And it's similar to a lot of commercial districts in the city. Parking is resolved in other ways. The owners actually own Maru Ramen, and that's another zone without any parking, but somehow all those restaurants on State Street there work.
Okay, any other questions? We'll have time for deliberation in a moment to discuss, but any other question for the appellants?
I guess I've got one, come to think of it. Do the owners expect to ever need all of those spaces at one time? Have they done any research on that, or what they expect their?
They don't feel that they need the parking. They didn't realize a parking variance would be needed. There was a discussion with the building department prior to building it, and there were supposedly no issues, but then once we got into it, later, the zoning obviously triggered the parking. So the intention is that there is again, that city lot across the way, I think there's 25 spaces over there. And then Washington Square Park, and then other street spaces. I mean, it's one of these things that might hinder the restaurant operation, but they're confident that it will work, just because, again, you look at those restaurants on State Street and they survive with all the parking on the street and other means of arriving.
And between the work that you're doing and the construction work, is this a substantial renovation on the inside and costly in that sense?
I mean, anytime you have to put in a commercial kitchen, grease trap, there's quite a bit going on. There were some savings in the dining area that was mostly just finishes, but then of course tables and chairs, and yeah, I mean, it's a tough industry. I wouldn't want to be in it.
So then the added capacity minus the parking will help fund or recoup the initial investment?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need a certain number of seats to make the operation successful. Yeah, it's one of those things that just feels a little odd to arbitrarily move walls around just to comply. I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's a natural process here. If the restaurant becomes known as a place where parking's a little difficult, the numbers would go down and find a natural balance, or people would find other ways to arrive. People might even walk over from State Street if those restaurants are busy once they've already parked over in that area.
Thank you.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions, then Megan, are there any people in support or opposition?
We have not received any written comments, nor do we have anyone signed up to speak in either support or opposition to this appeal.
Can you read the planning board's
Yes.
comments?
Sorry, bear with me one moment. Planning board said that the board does not identify any long-term planning issues with this proposal and supports the appeal. This is a welcome example of adaptive reuse of an existing building and will have a positive impact on the commercial corridor.
Thank you. So let's close the public meeting, and we can open up for discussion. So board members, what are you thinking?
I think it's pretty simple in my mind. I don't see there being negative impacts here. At this time, I intend to vote in favor.
They're a business trying to use an existing building downtown. We're losing restaurants. We've lost a couple of restaurants in that or at least one, yeah, a couple I can think of in that block, that stretch up there. Using an existing building, it comes with these parking issues. I mean, I think it, encouraging, perhaps even, having a full parking lot and encouraging people to walk or find other means of transport to get there from downtown might be a positive thing. What else do you think?
I think it's strategic on how the layout of the parking actually came together. The good use of the space, I think that they were mindful, again, having the ADA access, again, thinking holistically, well, if other places can do it, we don't necessarily need the additional parking. There's on-street parking, there's municipal, it's a short walk. I don't see any issues.
There's a bike rack. And maybe even, maybe it's a strategic thing also to have a really full parking lot. It makes the place look really busy and desirable. Yeah. Any other questions, Stephen?
No, I think it's in a great spot that's accessible by pedestrian means and cycling means.
And I also just want to comment that any other means of, making the area smaller, or, lopping off part of the building, I think is defeating the purpose here. You know, I think, you know, like I said, having a restaurant here and using the existing site and doing, you know, the best they can to squeeze a few more spaces out of that site makes sense. Okay, so any other comments? We can move on to, if there aren't any other comments, would someone like to make a motion?
Just to advise, the board is the lead agency for the environmental review on this appeal. So whoever makes the motion will also want to read that section on the motion form about environmental review. Typically it's the planning board, but this is one of the appeals where this board needs to take the lead on the environmental review. And if there's any questions about that, I know we don't do it all that often, I'm happy to answer. And the environmental review form is in the meeting packet.
So we would have to just go through it point by point, Megan?
No, I'm sure that you've all had a chance to look at it, and basically there's language there to for the BZA to declare themselves as lead agency for being responsible for the review, and then making a determination of any environmental significance. But if there's anything you would like to discuss in detail, you're welcome to go through that.
I'm just trying to get a sense for how, so we would just declare lead agency and then say we don't identify impacts that would sway the decision? Or?
It's what you're gonna, it's the terminology is there about identifying that you reviewed the form and the date on the form and determine whether the variance will have a significant or impact on the environment or not.
Megan, where is that in the packet? I can't find it.
Do you have the motion form that was sent this afternoon?
Yes.
It's on there. It's on the bottom of page 1 of the motion form for
Got
appeal
it.
number
Okay.
312.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion? Megan, do I make motions?
You can.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I think we've all had our turn today, and then whoever's left will do the last one. Sorry. Appeal number 3182. Area variance from section 325-8, column 4, off-street parking requirements of the zoning ordinance. I propose a motion to grant the variance. The factors considered, first, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby
Suzanne,
properties.
first go back and read that environmental review.
Oh,
section.
sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. You just said that. Sorry.
It's all right.
I got caught up in this form and I forgot. Sorry. Environmental review. This is an unlisted action under the City of Ithaca Environmental Quality Review Ordinance and the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and is subject to environmental review. The City of Ithaca Board of Zoning Appeals hereby declares itself lead agency for the environmental review for the approval of zoning appeal 3182, an area variance for the property located at 215 North Meadow Street in the City of Ithaca. The board has reviewed the short environmental assessment form dated February 19th, 2021, and determines that the requested variance will result in no significant impact on the environment. Okay. Factors considered, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties. The applicant proposes to renovate an existing convenience store to open a new restaurant at 215 North Meadow Street. The proposed project meets all the requirements of the zoning ordinance except off-street parking. The property is located in a relatively walkable area between the West End Commercial District and the North Side neighborhood. 17 of the 22 required spaces will be provided on site. Additional parking can be found in a nearby city-owned lot as well as on street in the area. Upon review of the proposed site plan and the board's review of existing conditions, the board finds that the proposed project will not result in an undesirable change in character in the neighborhood. In fact, it will remain quite similar to how it has been for a number of years. 2, whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by a feasible alternative to the variance. The applicant cannot provide additional spaces on site. The architect has described how they've squeezed every last space out of that, out of the site, including the required ADA spaces. The additional spaces, we didn't ask the appellant the question of whether they could be leased within 250 feet of the property. Megan, can
Remove
I?
that if you
Let's
can
remove it.
ask them
Okay,
or
let's
you can
remove it.
Okay.
3, whether the requested variance is substantial. I'd argue no. The applicant proposes to offer 17 of the 22 required parking spaces on site and seeks a variance for the remaining 5 of the required parking. And this, in my view, is not a substantial request. Would the variance have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood? No. The Board of Zoning Appeals, acting as lead agency, has conducted the appropriate environmental review and determined that the requested variance would not have a negative impact on the environment. April 6, 2021. Furthermore, the board's review of the submitted site plans, testimony from the applicant, and consideration of existing conditions have not provided evidence of adverse physical or environmental impacts. Whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, suppose so, yes. However, the alleged difficulty is self-created, and that the applicant could have designed a smaller restaurant or lopped off part of the building to reduce the off-street parking requirements. However, a smaller restaurant would result in less revenue and potentially be less financially viable for the project owners. Given the purchase and investment in the site as it is, the board determines that the benefits of the project, including the adaptive reuse of an existing building and the creation of a new restaurant downtown, outweigh the fact that the difficulty was self-created. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by David. Okay, Megan, can you poll the members?
Mr. Birkin,
Yes.
Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
Ms. Egan Engels,
Yes.
Ms. Charles.
Yes.
Great. Well, your variance request has been approved. You'll be receiving a written approval of the off-street parking variance, and I will send a copy to you as well as the building division so that you can move forward and begin your work.
And when
Right,
is the
great.
restaurant
Thank you
set
very
to open?
much.
When is the restaurant set to
Hopefully-
open?
Hopefully in July. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep. All right. Have a good
Thank
night. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, Megan, can you read our 5th and final
Yes.
case?
All right, so appeal number 3183 for 500 South Meadow Street. Appeal of Ben Gingrich of HSB Architects on behalf of project sponsor Key Bank and property owner Wegmans Food Markets for an area variance from section 325(8), column 5, off-street loading, and column 12, other front yard requirements of the zoning ordinance. The applicant proposes to subdivide the property at 500 South Meadow Street and construct a branch office for Key Bank on a portion of the site currently used for overflow parking. The project will involve the construction of a 3,415 square foot, 1-story building and 59 parking spaces, as well as landscaping and site improvements. The subdivided lot will have 2 front yards, one on Meadow Street and a second on the access roads that leads to the Wegmans location. The proposed project will meet the front yard requirements along Meadow Street, where the building will be located 29.6 feet from the curb and will occupy 53% of the lot frontage along the street. There will be a deficiency in the second front yard along the interior road. The building will be located 40 feet from that curb and must be located 15 to 34 feet from the curb to meet the requirement of the zoning ordinance. In addition, the bank branch office is required to have 1 off-street loading space that is a minimum of 450 square feet. The project is proposing to construct no designated off-street loading. The property is located in the SW2 use district in which the proposed use is permitted. However, section 32532 requires that an area variance be granted before a building permit is issued. All right, Mr. Gingrich, I see you're here. Are there any other members of your team joining you?
Garth Winterkorn
Yep, okay.
and Bob Stadler. Sometimes that was his last name, Stadler.
I don't see him there.
Okay,
But
that's okay.
I do have,
Garth is our
Comment.
civil engineer from Costage Engineering.
great, okay. All right.
So, I'll wait till Garth joins here. Okay, Garth is on the line here. He is our civil engineer who's been helping us sort of navigate this process as well. So we're planning a bank branch here on South Meadow Street. The site, you know, we initially thought it was a pretty straightforward site. We ran into some serious site constraints with this layout. Number one was the issue of being in a floodplain, and some newer New York State requirements that mandate we raise our building pad. Were raised about 5 foot above South Meadow Street, which created some real practical difficulties on the site. So if I can share my screen, second, I'm going to share my, able to see that? Okay. So I think the letter kind of shows it best here. I've got the bank branch location adjacent to Wegmans Food Market here along South Meadow Street. And then I just have this sort of marked up site plan showing our setback variances. So obviously on South Meadow Street, we do comply with the setback variance there. We were challenged with figuring a way to get good public access to the front door. The Planning Commission at one point had wanted us to have a door right onto South Meadow Street. That would have just created some terrible switchback ramps along the street, which we thought was a terrible idea. What we ended up with was a sort of grand staircase up to the building to sort of navigate the grade change. We were also able to make a ramp along this side of the building, but the ramp is indistinguishable. It just looks like sidewalk. So we're able to do the ramp with that's under 1 to 20 slope where you don't have to have handrails. It's just a sidewalk. So we're able to get down to the public sidewalk without any special ramping, which was really important to us. We're able to have a nice public access that really addresses the intersection here, which is another goal. To do that, though, it was just getting too tight on this side of the site. We're also struggling with sort of an odd lot line here with this corner notched out. So we are using a 40-foot setback as opposed to the maximum 34. We don't think that this is incompatible with the neighborhood, and we're taking a lot of measures to really address the street. And it's really just due to these really substantial grade issues that we're grappling with. One of the other requirements is for a loading and unloading zone. There's no loading or unloading for a bank. It's really not needed at all. So we don't have that at any of our other bank branches, and it's really not necessary. So that was really about it. Let me show you one more thing. This was from our recent planning commission. We did a couple of renderings to show the character of what the building looks like from the intersection. So we're just trying to show that, well, first off, we're trying to show planning commission that the grade change isn't that extreme. We've landscaped it in a way to look good. But I think it also shows that the setback also isn't that extreme that we're showing. It really addresses the street, and the stairway kind of comes right down to the sidewalk. So I think it's a good approach. And again, this is from the side that we are addressing the variance on. And it's really pretty close to the sidewalk. So we feel like this is a good solution for the site, and that's why we're requesting the variance. And I'm open to any question the board has.
Questions? you go back to the site plan for a second?
Yes. I do have a full site plan if it's needed. This was sort of a marked up version.
That's fine.
Okay.
So if you were going to, it's 40, you would have to, and the max was 34, you would have had to scoot the whole building 6 feet north, right?
Yeah, and it was really, and Garth can speak to this a little bit more, it was really creating challenges with the grading of the site.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that space that's there or matching up with the ramp that's coming up from the parking. It was more your subtle grading up to make it look like a grassy knoll instead of a building up on 5 feet stilts, right?
Yeah, and Garth could speak. Garth, could you speak to a little bit about the grading a little bit, the challenges on that side? It was more than one thing. It was a lot of challenges.
Yeah, so the whole idea was a pedestrian connection to the existing sidewalk that you see that runs east-west and parallels Wegmans entrance. So as Ben's elevation showed, we do have the stairs, and then we have a landing up front. We wanted a little space with that landing because we're proposing bike racks as well, which the planning, the PDB actually really encouraged us to do. And pushing the building further north would simply require more stairs, most likely, and maybe relocating that bike rack, because I don't know if we'd want it, right next to the main entrance, right next to the door.
And Garth, I think there was also issues of, you're not just moving this line, the line here gets extremely close to that line. And as you know, we can't, I think this was also a pinch point. We really can't.
There's a jog in the property there that's due to the signal equipment.
So we really can't change grade off of our site. So if we were to ship this building further north, I can show you the topo plan. That might be more. Is the topo plan? No, sorry, that's a photometric. One moment, I'll dig up the topo plan. It's loading slowly today. Okay, keep going. Here it is.
There we go.
Yeah, so you can really see on the topography plan, just the real pinch points that we're dealing with on the site, especially this point here. Any closer and we would have been at a grade that it would have been too steep to mow.
And are you also applying a prototype bank to this site? One that you've built in other places, rather than design something that's going to maybe adapt more specifically to this odd property configuration? Is that true or no?
I mean, we use some prototype elements for sure. We have adapted this to the site in the sense that usually the banks have a drive-through canopy that's attached to them. This site was so unique that we had to push the building, and we knew the city wanted the building close to the street. We had to push the building up to the street. The site was too narrow to have traffic go around it for a canopy, so we separated that off of the building. So yes, it's certainly a prototype look, but every building we do adapt to the site. The board the planning commission was also appreciative of the fact that we're really not turning our back to the street, and the fact that we have a lot of windows and sort of pedestrian scale elements facing the street. That's been our general feedback from them so far.
Any other questions, board members?
I'm okay. I don't think so.
I think the appellant did a pretty good job of spelling out why we're here and how we've gotten to this point. Stephen or Stephanie, anything?
I don't have any questions, no.
Okay. Okay, then Megan, is anybody here to speak in opposition or in favor?
No, we have not received any written comments, neither support or opposition, and do not have anyone signed up to speak.
Okay, could you read the planning board's comments in? Or am I supposed to be doing that, Megan?
No, that's fine. I
Okay.
can do that. I have too many screens open. Bear with me. Okay. The board does not identify any long-term planning issues with this proposal and supports the appeal. Due to its location in a floodplain, the building floor must be 5 feet above the existing grade. The setback is therefore needed to accommodate an accessible entrance from the sidewalk. The board also supports infill projects such as this that replace an existing surface parking lot with a building.
Great. Is there a motion? Okay, so I think we've all done one tonight, right? So, okay, David, go ahead.
Try this out. Okay, the above motion is for appeal number 3183 for the Key Bank property. Let's see here at 500 South Meadow Street. Let's see here. For starters, factors considered: number one, whether an undesirable change would be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties. I propose that this is a no. The applicant proposes to construct a branch office for Key Bank on the surface parking lot located at 500 Meadow Street. Upon review of the proposed site plan and the board's review of existing condition, the board finds that the proposed project will not result in an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood. This type of structure and use is in line with both the zoning and the established characteristics of this neighborhood. Number two, whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by a feasible alternative to the variance. The key word here is feasible. Arguably, yes, they could figure out some alternate designs. The applicant meets the requirements for the site primary front yard. The applicant is creating an accessible entrance along this, the second front yard located off the access road to Wegmans. Due to requirements for constructions in the floodplain, the building floor must be elevated 5 feet above grade. In theory, yes, the applicant could design the project in a different way, especially regarding the off-street loading space. Number three, whether the requested variance is substantial. Arguably, no. The applicant proposes to construct the building facade 40 from the curb, which is a greater setback than the 15 to 34 allowed by zoning. This is not a substantial request. In addition, the applicant seeks a variance for one space or 100% of the off-street loading requirement for the project. Again, as it pertains to the utility of the structure, the off-street loading is not a substantial use nor need. Number four, will the variance have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood? No. The applicant has taken some pretty stringent design focus, remediation of any potential flooding, and has really adapted their structure to any environmental risk or changes for building in this area. Furthermore, the board's review of the submitted site plans, testimony from the applicant, and consideration of existing conditions have not provided evidence of adverse physical or environmental impacts. Number five, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. Yes, the applicant took on the project at their own volition and seeks to build a structure and has navigated this process accordingly. The alleged difficulty is self-created in that the applicant could meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance, by providing an alternate plan in theory. Let's see here. However, let's see. However, the nature of the self-inflicted difficulty does not overshadow the merits of the variance as a whole, and thereby move forward a motion to grant this variance.
I'll second that. Megan, can you poll the members?
Barkin,
Yes.
Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
Ms. Egan Engels,
Yes.
Ms. Charles.
Yes.
Right, thank you. Your request for variance is approved. I will send you written the written approval and also forward it on to the code inspectors so that you can move forward with the next step of your site plan and building permitting.
Great. Appreciate all of your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the presentation coming up, but I suggest that we take a 5-minute break if that's okay with you to go have a, like we like to say, a bio break and be back here in 5 minutes, okay?
Sounds good.
Thank
So
you.
it's 8:16, that would make it 8:22. See you then. Welcome back. Okay, I think we're all here. Megan, is the presenter here?
They are. I'm going to admit them in and just make sure we have everyone in once Mr. Trasher's joining us. Hey, James, how are you? Oh,
Unmute.
there
Good,
you go.
how are you?
Good. Who all is here with you this evening?
We should have Tim Fish, Brandon Danke, and Jeff Giffens.
Okay, so I got two of them coming in. And just for the members of the board, the team is here tonight to give us an overview of the project that will be coming in a few months for area variances. And so this will give you a little bit of an earlier look at the project and is an opportunity to ask questions and get more information from the team or suggest some things that you would like to see when they return. We are going to hold all deliberations of any variance requests until they submit their application and come back for consideration of their appeal. But with that, I will, Suzanne, are you ready to let them begin or?
Yes, I think I'm ready.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead, begin your presentation.
Okay, good evening, James Trasher. I'm the civil engineer on the project. With us is the developer, Jeff Giffens from Peak Made out of Atlanta, Georgia. Brandon Danke from Cooper Carey, project architect. Tim Fish. So Megan, when you see Tim Fish, like show up in the room, let him in. But we just wanted to give a brief overview. You may have seen us in the newspaper or heard through conversation of our proposed project at the Gateway Center. So really wanted to, through conversations with the planning department and other staff, give your board an overview of where we are, what we're doing. So when it comes to you in an application, and our plan is to submit an application by April 16th, 17th. So depending on schedule, we could be on your June agenda is our hopes. But Brandon, do you want to give them an overview of the site and where we are and what the project is all about? So to preface that, Gateway Center, 6 Mile Creek, State Street, Green Street is our property boundaries, and I'll let Brandon take it away.
All right, let me share my screen here. All right, you can all see rendering, 3D rendering. Volume's okay?
Yep.
All right, so here's a view of our proposed apartment project on at the Gateway Center, currently a surface lot for most of this area. And you can see 6 Mile Creek in the kind of the foreground, the right-hand side of the picture here. And we'll start by just kind of walking you through the area, talk a little bit about the floor plan and some of our big architectural moves, cruise through the floor plans, elevations, and then some 3D views at the end that I think will really help anchor the building in its context. So this is our site in the Tuning Fork District, just east of downtown. We're bordered by State Street, 6 Mile Creek to the south, East State Street to the north, and we're to the east of where East Green Street and Seneca kind of hook back into State Street. So here's downtown, Center Ithaca off to the west side. City Center is a point of reference, and then the Gateway buildings here with the clock tower, our site that you can kind of see through, mostly surface parking. And then there's kind of a one-story metal frame warehouse building at the end. So we're access to the site is really from this existing road to the west, and we're kind of nestled in to the trees and the creek, and the site goes up very steeply along the public road of East State Street. You'll see in some of our elevations, pretty incredible grade change
40, 50 feet once you get up to this upper side, which really helps kind of nestle our building into the hill. And some of you may be aware of, this is also the site of the city project to repair the retaining wall that holds East State Street. And that's ongoing now. So we're coordinating some of our design. We're going to be building up nearby that construction that's going on now. So there's been back and forth between our design group and their group. Here's a little bit of an architectural site plan, kind of what we were looking, but just isolated our site. So again, the existing gateway buildings, I'm not sure if this one has a name. I think this is the one with the kind of dominoes in the bottom. And this is the office building with the clock tower. And again, entry through the west side. Our building is kind of divided into two buildings. We're calling it the west wing and the east wing, of the same height, but they're kinked and kind of following the elbow, the little bend in the river. We have a fire apparatus road on the south side that's required by code and has actually been a really important design element that we've been working with Chief Parsons since the beginning to get the requirements that he needs for his truck and his equipment to get in there, fight any fires or any emergencies that would happen. And we've been able to work back and forth with him. What started as a 26-foot wide asphalt road, we've been able to reduce to 20 feet by playing with where the building sits, by giving him a certain amount of space between the building and the road, locating the road a certain dimension from the property line at the river, at the 6 Mile Creek, and then by having kind of these breaks in the building. So we'll talk a lot about these courtyards or these breaks. We think they help on several fronts. They actually allowed us technically to have a space where the fire truck could use that wider space to park and hook up to the building and fight fires. Architecture, it helps break down our massing. From the units, it kind of creates an internal courtyard where residents can have a little small gathering space outside, and it gives us more windows because it's instead of just being a flat wall, we now have ins and outs. So we think that it's doing a lot of good for kind of the massing of the building. So the building is 7 stories. The west side has on the very immediate kind of that greets you when you enter on the ground floor, a floor and a half tall amenities area. I think let me go back one page. I think it jumped one ahead here. The hang on one second, guys. Let's go out of full screen mode. There we go. So the if we zoom in here, the west side of the building is kind of the amenities area here. So this is where a leasing office would be. This is where residents could come and get packages or Amazon or food delivery. The blue is a fitness center, and there's some miscellaneous offices, copy rooms that go with the leasing business. And the grade is a little lower on this side, so we're kind of gaining about half a floor, and that's why everything off to the right is kind of dug into the hill. And then as you move across the site, this west building is parking, so ramp goes up and spirals up 3 floors of parking. The east side has 1 level of parking on grade and then 6 levels above. I'm gonna throw a quick diagram up here that just kind of shows in section. This kind of explains it a little better. So here we are, we're just cut through the long side of the building on the bottom drawing. Everything in green is parking. The west side is 3 levels of parking. You can see the ramps, and then 4 levels of residential apartments above that. And the east side is 1 level of parking with the 6 levels of res above it. And they all share basically a common datum line profile on the sky, common height. While this is up, I'll just go ahead and kind of zoom in. This is some of the math that we've been doing to comply with the building code and to comply with the zoning code. We are in CB 60, and in order to make this project work with the heights that we were looking for, basically 1.5 floors at the amenities and then 10-foot floors on up, and a little extra for some transfer structure. Our average grade plane is the red line, and the height for this group is really, we're rounding it to 70 feet, 69.4, 70 feet above the grade plane to our roof. So we are asking for a variance, and we're going to go through that process. That's why we're presenting this to you, to ask for basically an extra 10 feet out of the CB 60. I'm gonna flip back to the plans. So we spent a lot of really good conversations with the zoning, with the planning board, working on the elevations, working on the massings, the ins and outs. For example, taking a parking deck and screening it with units so that there's occupied space in there with activity and people coming and going with their own access right there with kind of stoops. And then as we spiral up, the parking keeps going up on these two levels, and the east side starts filling in with a little more of a traditional double loaded corridor with units on both sides. But again, the units kind of protrude out to the 6 Mile Creek. And also, I say these protrude out, but what it actually does is the main building kind of recedes back, and we've created these little courtyards. So several of these units all have views of the creek as the building steps up. And then when we get up to the upper floors, this floor up here should be the top level of the parking. So now we've capped the parking on the west side, and our building again kind of takes this courtyard form now on the north that faces East State Street, and the building undulates in. So we've created these courtyards, and in fact, at this central courtyard, the city wall project is right here, this white line. We're proposing that we're going to bridge over this. So we're going to have a pedestrian bridge, not for cars, but for folks walking in this building could actually enter the building or exit the building at this level in an open plaza, come into a public, kind of semi-public event room or club room that we have, and then find their way to the nearby stairs or elevators. So we're really, even though our building is kind of sandwiched against this tall hill here, we're taking advantage of the grade and coming in actually 3 or 4 stories up and using a bridge to walk across. So I think that's going to be a pretty nice element. Just kind of a point of reference here. This is our neighbor, Alpha Phi Alpha Memorial is kind of that box right here. If I zoom out, you can see where it is. And we've been working with them a little bit. Their project is behind, but we've been talking with with the planning board and with that developer on how maybe our buildings can work together, and maybe they could share some sort of stair or ability that, like we walk into our building here, that you could allow folks to walk down and get to 6 Mile Creek without having to go all the way around the block. All right, so these are our elevations as we start moving through the outside the building. This is facing 6 Mile Creek, and again, as you see in plan, it's a long building, but we've really tried to cut up the massing, create smaller buildings with different architectural moves, looking at the context, looking at how other buildings in the area, even though they may be smaller, they have use of materials, they have a base, middle, and a top, they have good use of brick. So we've kind of used, I guess I'll say, an industrial inspiration idea of maybe a found warehouse that has had these interventions, new Juliet balconies inserted in, maybe a metal layer as if 2 new floors were added, trying to make the building look like it has some patina and has advanced over time. And then as you work your way down to the end, using the same simple palette of brick, metal, glass, and metal balconies, but in different compositions. This view up top is from East State Street, and this is where you can see the grade is pretty aggressive, and our 6-story building, our 6 stories of residence are barely visible on this side. And when we get to the high side, really only 2 stories are peeking out because of that aggressive grade as you go up the hill. This is a view just looking at our courtyards. This resolution isn't great, so I'm going to skip to a 3D view of that. Right up here, this is the project, we were calling it Gateway. This would be a view coming from State Street of a pedestrian bridge. Right here, we're thinking maybe there's a trellis and some festival lights, really grand entry for students to get in, for residents to get in here. And these are just various shots around the building. This is our parking. You can tell we're trying to screen it. There's a little bit of an entry here. Landscaping in the courtyard. James will walk you through some of those. And just some 3D views of the architecture. Here's some cuts, sections through the site showing you how high we are up on East State Street. Here's our building, and then we drop down to the creek, and then the neighbors on the other side are actually sitting up almost at our roof level. And then real quick, here's our building in context. So we've taken some photos, right, of the existing gateway center here, and we've kind of photoshopped in our building at that angle. So we feel that it relates to this kind of rhythm of facade, of kind of warehousey windows. We're trying to take cues from that architecture and apply it to ours. So again, this is our building in East State Street as it currently looks. And then from the other side, looking through the houses, this is from the south, you can see that the roads are so high, we're almost looking over the roof of our building. And here's a shot with the closer gateway building. And here's our building here nestled along 6 Mile Creek. Any questions or anything? If not, we'll keep going. James, do you want to dive into this landscaping plan at all, or do you want us to talk about it?
Just briefly, because we appreciate your time, so landscaping and the public benefit that we've been working with on the planning board is really connectivity between East State Street and 6 Mile Creek. So the Alpha Phi Alpha property, which is along State Street, which will be coming into the planning board into the city. So Alpha Phi Alpha in Cornell, it's the oldest Black fraternity in America. So as an honor to that, they want to create a memorial here. So between the city engineering staff with the retaining wall, our design team, and we're working with their architects and folks to figure out connectivity from their memorial to our site down to 6 Mile Creek so we can provide parking. Also, as part of the city plan, there's always been the discussion of the extension of the 6 Mile Creek. Currently on the site, the creek comes in and it stops midway into the site. Frost, the previous owner or the current owner, had done that when they developed the Gateway project. We're looking to extend the walkway to the far end to the city property. And then we met with city engineers and staff about extending the walkway onto city-owned property. So in the future, they could continue the connection down the creek, across the creek, and up to the existing bridge that crosses over the creek. So we're working in conjunction. Really, the purpose of tonight was to get you in tune to what we're doing. So it isn't the first time you hear it when the application comes in. If there's questions or information that you would find important, we'll go through all the, points of a variance case and provide all that information. But really, we just wanted to get some initial information to you, any feedback you may have, and answer any preliminary questions or comments. So with that, you guys.
Thank you. I guess, Megan, is it at all appropriate now to ask what variances you think you're going to need? Just so we can start to think about it.
Is it okay for me to tell Megan what we're going to be applying for?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, we will be applying for a height variance, and we'll go through those things. So as we said, we're in the 60-foot zone. We're at 69 feet 4 inches. So we'll be asking for a deviation of 9 feet 4 inches. And then we'll work with Megan to determine the lot coverage, scenario where, our calculations and how she calculates. So that might be the 2 items. But in our lot coverage, that we are covering the lot between building and, parking versus current building and current parking. We're pretty much matching those items. So we're waiting for final tweaks with the planning board if there's any other things that come. But as I said, our hope is to have an application in this week. We're finishing up the seeker process with the planning board, and once they complete that, we could be in front of your board. So I believe that's where we are. Megan, I don't know if in your brain there's anything else. That's what we believe we have to seek relief on as part of this project.
Yes, I know we had talked about height initially, and I'm not sure about the lot coverage, but I definitely look at all the requirements when once I see the plans, once the planning board and you have come to your most recent iteration, I think it's great for the board to hear things that you and the planning board talked about. So bit of what the background is. I can also say as just an information piece, and I think it was mentioned as well, that the city is very interested and excited to see the structured parking because that is going to be a big need in the downtown area as we continue to grow housing units in the core of the city, which is very desirable, but there still is a parking need. And so this project will help alleviate some of that need, and there is public parking available too. So
Correct. And we'll give you more information on that. But as it relates to parking, you know, the ratio of our parking to what we're giving the existing office building. So we're taking up, you know, the site where currently surface parking is, and we're going to provide all the necessary parking for the office building, for the tenant spaces in the apartments. We are going to provide enough parking spaces for our tenants. And then we are also going to provide public mixed use spaces within the garage. So we're working through that. And we believe our ratio and how we're doing this is a benefit to, you know, the existing property owner retaining the two buildings and not over parking this project, because at the end of the day, with public transit and things going differently in the future with different means of getting from here to there, we're accommodating those things, Uber, Lyft, TCAT, all those items into our project, bike parking, etc.
Yeah, that does remind me, James. It's almost a public parking lot wrapped in our building, disguised. We even they'll have their own elevators and their own stairs, and you can see the proximity to the office buildings. The folks that park here basically either come down 1 or 2 levels and they're right there across the way, or they can make their way out if they wanted to go walking on the path. So yeah, it's kind of a hidden public parking deck wrapped in a building.
Is it public parking in that sense? Or is it actually parking to serve the existing structure? And is it a condition upon you receiving access to do this project?
Yeah, I'll give a little, and this is Jeff Givens, guys. And we've got a number of parking needs to fulfill here with the parking structure that we're building. The first is to replace the parking spaces that we're displacing in the existing surface parking lot. And that's round numbers 135 spaces that serve the current Gateway office building and apartment building and retail. So in order to build on, you know, the parking lot, we have to replace those spaces for those tenants. We're then adding spaces to serve our own residents within the parking garage. And then there is the potential for surplus parking above both of those needs, the existing needs and then our own residential needs. And then what I think is really interesting, and we don't have this completely structured yet, but the ability for kind of office hour, or let's say after office hour parking, in a big portion of this lot will be vacant, you know, once 5 o'clock hits or 6 o'clock. And, you know, we're trying to create both in our access control and in program the ability for shared parking, meaning that parking that's used for business during the day could be used for maybe visitors to downtown Ithaca in the evening after business hours. And there's plenty of, it's real, the evolution of parking technology has come a long way, and the ability to do that fairly easily with remote parking management, you know, is it really enables us to do this here. So the specific details are still evolving, but the hope is, we will provide parking for ourselves, the Gateway tenants, and then for, you know, non-residents, non-tenants in a public format during certain times of the day.
And does your firm currently own this parcel, or you have an option to exercise?
No, we do not own this yet. We are under contract to purchase the property from the current owner, and that will likely close in early this summer, making way for a construction start in July of this year.
Okay. And then the total width and length of the structure, just so I can.
Yeah, Brandon, I'll turn to you on.
I don't know if I know that offhand.
Yeah.
I think
it's about it's 120 feet wide because of the parking deck. I'm sorry I was late getting on the call. And yeah, we'll have to check the other dimension for you. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Okay. I'm just curious to know the actual square foot amount, the amortized amount of relief sought for the height variance. So.
Okay. I'd like to add just one thing on what James said about the height variance. He said the 9'4". I would suggest that we might ask for just a little bit more than that for construction tolerance and as design proceeds, just to give us a little bit of leeway. So.
I was figuring when the city was done constructing the wall, the average grade may change. So we had some leeway with the Tim Lowe's work.
Yeah.
We're going to have them fill the site.
That's right.
As you move forward, do you foresee any neighborhood opposition or any concerns there that you're aware of that you're trying to placate ahead of coming to the BZA?
We've had public hearings on this project, so we've gone to the historic neighborhood across the street, and they've offered comment. Most of the comments we've received is, architectural elements. Initially we got, and we're not hide anything. Our first meeting with the planning board, they said it's too big and it looks like a big rectangle on site. And through 6 months of iterations, I believe a good majority of the planning board believes we've solved a lot of their questions and concerns as it relates to the development of this. Folks across the 6 Mile Creek haven't been there, so I would say at our public hearing there was 4 people who spoke on the project. So we haven't had large opposition. So no.
A few of the items that we've talked about through our planning board meetings, just so y'all hear. At first, there was a comment that the roof line felt too continuous and it made the building feel very long and kind of opposing. So we worked with them to find some areas like here. We pulled out a couple bedroom units on the top floor to put an amenities terrace that residents could go out and use. There's a similar area here that maybe could have some landscaping or some lighting at night, and kind of the up and down that you can start to see with some of the elements here. I think that satisfied a lot of what their concerns was. They said, all right, in the beginning, you guys were a little monochromatic across the top. Now we're starting to read like several vertical buildings standing shoulder to shoulder. A little bit of change in materials. I think that was kind of important too, that we don't just have all of the pieces look exactly the same, that building A doesn't look like B, like C. So we've kind of, even though the plans are fairly similar, we've played with balconies. So you can see where these flower boxes are. These kind of represent a little, instead of just balconies that stack, a little bit of a regular rhythm to give it some interest. What else, Tim, were some of the other comments that we were picking up from?
I think the amenitizing the access road in front and creating the pathway and the landscaping. We've actually put some courtyards that extend, from the building out to the pathway in terms of the paving patterns and everything right there. So, trying to make this a public amenity, really for the city.
And I'll add one more, and it was probably the most discussed item of any, and it was the width of the fire lane, and that and Chief Parsons was a great partner in evaluating how we could reduce it from the original 26 feet to 20 feet. The desires of the planning board were to provide as much of a planning buffer as we could in between the drive lane and the creek walk, and maybe, well, there's some debate whether it should be between the creek walk and the drive lane, or the drive lane and the building. We kind of split the difference, and with some change in construction type, we volunteered to go to a more substantial construction type in order to reduce the fire lane down from 26 feet to 20 feet, and still code compliant, New York State and local fire code. But that helped to, kind of address the desires of having this kind of gateway and creek walk really have all the buffering and landscaping that we could have.
It might be worth mentioning the stairway down from State Street as well, if you didn't mention that yet.
All right. Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah, Brandon covered
Sorry,
that, I
yeah,
think,
I
before you
was-
joined, Tim.
Apparently I was on a delayed YouTube feed, so I apologize.
It does do that.
Yeah.
I think it will be helpful for the board, and I can follow up with the team about this, but I think to submit some of this information in writing to follow up, because it's a lot to process, particularly for those who are seeing this project for the first time. But I do recall from when this project first came to the pre-application meeting that there have been, a good number of changes in what the initial appearance was from the, I'll say positive too, from the initial concepts. And I don't know if there's any of those that when you submit your application, you might share any early renderings or things like that with the board to show them how you've responded to comments. I think that will be helpful as well.
Yeah, and we can do that. And I think one of the things, and just as for all board members, you live in the community, but sometimes you really haven't been to the site. And I think it was an awakening for some of the people on the planning board when they actually made a site visit there together to take a look at the creek walk, the creek, what we were doing, how this building laid into the site, what the city was doing with the retaining wall, and how it was sort of a good master plan for what would happen in that area. So I'd recommend that as the weather gets better, you can walk the creek walk. You can see where our trail is going to go. There's little pink ribbons out there that the city engineer in our office put in, and you can take a nice walk, and we'll have an application in, and we'll officially be hopefully in front of you on June 1. Planning board, seeker, and submission, by review by Megan, willing to put us on that agenda if we can hit all those timetables. So.
Great, thank you. And yeah, this is very helpful to see this. Yeah, thank you very much. If there aren't any other questions from the board. Okay, great, thanks. Oh, Stephen, do you have a question? Sorry to step on your comment.
Yeah, no, you're fine. The one thing that I just can't get over is that it seems like you're making a giant apartment cul-de-sac, basically, with one exit in front of Angel Hearts there. Has that been considered? I mean, I know that's not really the
That's a
BZA's.
planning board.
Yeah.
They've been going through that.
Yeah. So in terms of traffic access, traffic study's been done. We're working with the state DOT with Eric Hathaway and his folks at the city and access management, the ins and outs to the site. Once again, with Chief Parsons on fire access to the site and making sure this is a safe area. So we're looking for betterments. Actually, our traffic study went and looked at the entire downtown traffic pattern, just not at the intersection of like State, Seneca, and Green. The city made us go all the way back through analyzing traffic signals and trying to do overall improvements for traffic flow through the downtown area. So, so we've looked at that.
Stephen, I can pull out some of that information so that you have it for your reference, though, because that has been something that has required a lot of looking at. So can pull that out from the environmental review when we get to that point and share it with you.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I'm just thinking about it from a pedestrian point of view, and yeah.
I have a question as it pertains to the variances. At the inception of the project, you decided to go for a variance. Did any of your renderings, or at any point in the project, did you consider not going for variances? Because you have very favorable zoning and a huge lot.
I'll take first crack at that. I guess the hardships that we have here, we want to provide enough parking to serve ourselves, the gateway tenants and apartments, provide some for the public. And to do that effectively, we had to go, vertical with our parking structure to get the, capacity that we needed. And so that, really, we had a kind of a fixed idea of what the residential program needed to be. And, to accommodate that and the parking, we had to add, we went from 6 to 7 levels, which added the additional height requests. The other kind of oddity of this site is because it is so far below State Street, we have the blessing and the curse of not being, very visible from State Street, even at 7 stories. The curse is you've got a portion of your residential units that are down in a hole, and we wanted to alleviate that to the extent that we could, such that you don't have at least a large number of units facing either the city retaining wall or the backside of a slope. So trying to hit all objectives, parking, view shed, and just the unique condition of the site, in actually raising the residential levels by the parking levels being below them, it helped to get the residential units out of this condition that was not the most attractive scenario if you didn't have the ability to raise those units vertically. And one other comment, in keeping with the office building, it actually, the top of the office building and the top of this building are almost identical. So, in context, it matches a height plane that exists already. And, we were mindful of that in wanting to have some beacon that's out there that exists that we could say is a precedent for this.
But yeah, I think to answer the question in the first part of the question, did we study it? Yeah, I think we started with, I don't know how many, 20, 30 sketches of smaller individual buildings, 5 stories, and just trying to juggle all of the variables that Jeff just explained in order as parking needed to, as more information came on what parking needed to be, the only way to go was up. We were hemmed in from both sides.
Yeah, and the fire lane access was another constraint in having to get to all sides of the building for fire access. It was quite a jigsaw puzzle, and to get to this point took many iterations in really collaboration with planning board to land on the concept that we think is, considering all factors, really the best alternative to meet all objectives, and both as developer and from the planning board's perspective.
This hammerhead turnaround was basically custom tailored with Chief Parsons and his truck. He got out and did turning radiuses and chalked them off and told us exactly what they needed to be. It started to occupy a pretty good portion of the land there in the end. But as we worked through, he said, "This is what I need. You got to give me this, so I can get in and out of the site."
Anything else? Any other
Yes,
questions?
we'll work with Megan, right? If there's more information, I mean, we can just reach out that way and get some updates as we go.
Think of questions, please let me know, because I'll be working with the team before the meeting where they come for their appeal to put together an application that addresses all the questions that you have and provides the information you need. So it's a lot to absorb tonight. So if you do think of something, definitely please send me an email, because it's important to all of us that you have that information to make the decision.
We really appreciate you putting us on the end of agenda where you've been on for a while, just to hear what we're doing. So you do have a better understanding of our project. So we do appreciate you taking the extra 45 minutes tonight to spend with us.
Great. Thank you so much. This was very helpful.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Right, everyone. I think the only remaining agenda item was the February minutes, but I don't know if people have had an opportunity to go through them. If not, I know that was a big meeting. We can hold them for another month if you'd prefer.
I haven't seen them. I didn't take a look at them. Megan said it'd be good to hold off on that.
Okay, that's no problem. I don't know why all of you don't read my minutes before the moment I send them out, but okay, fine.
I read through the 5 proposals. That was enough. We can take care of that next time.
Well, let me give you a sneak peek of the next meeting. So we will again have 4 appeals on the agenda. We are looking at 3 area variances and 3 area variance and a sign variance. So those will be coming forward and getting out to you in a few weeks. I know this might be one of the first sign variants that a couple of you have had. So if you have questions about that beforehand, we can go over that, because it is a little bit different. And our sign variance is our sign ordinance is in desperate need of update, and it becomes very clear when we get some of these sign variances in. So yes, so that is the plan. So we won't have continued appeals or presentations next month, but we will have those 4 cases.
Good. Okay. So do I declare this adjourned? Is that what happens next?
Absolutely.
Okay. Or we can just keep talking all night. So is there any